The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on your Wednesday. We are our fourth week into, for most of us, working remotely with COVID-19, and we are in our fourth week of our Vanderbloemen Network live series for schools. And today we're joined by Stephen Zeal, who we are thrilled to have with us and learn from today. So a quick recap, some housekeeping. For those of you who still have questions about the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program under the CARES Act, we would love to do our best to help you with that. We're not going to dive into that on this webinar, but definitely feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. We'll do our best to help you. You can also go to our website, schoolcovid19.com. We also have churchcovid19.com. It's schoolcovid19.com, where you can find all of the resources that we have around the CARES Act specifically, and these replays of these webinars we've been doing. That is a hub for you for all of our COVID-19 resources. So without further ado, for those of you who don't know me yet, which most of you have been with us from week to week, but I'm Holly Tate. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Vanderbloemen. I've been on the team for almost 8 years as we get to help Christian organizations build their best teams through staffing and succession planning. I've also got my colleague Brian Jensen here, who is our executive search consultant who focuses on education. So Brian, I'll let you, I know most people on the call know who you are, but for those who are joining us for the first time today, if you could share your story with us, we would really appreciate that.
Wonderful. Thank you again for these Wednesday series webinars. They've been fun. I hope they've been as helpful as they have been enjoyable for us, talking with guests and friends from around the country as we try and navigate this time together. As Holly mentioned, I work primarily with our Christian education entities and nonprofits. I've been with Vanderbloemen now for over a year and come out of the Christian education sector. I spent 15 years working at different Christian higher ed institutions and have a deep love and passion for Christian education and seeing it continue even in the midst of some tumultuous days. Excited to share my thoughts today.
Well, we're glad that you are here with us, Brian. And we also have Stephen Zeal with us. Stephen, I'm going to let you tell your story because you have quite the resume with Christian education. But we are so excited to have you in our state of Texas, currently serving at Texas A&M. And so I would love for you to introduce yourself, share your story, but also give us some insight into what it's like to have essentially a very large town, which is the campus of A&M, go remote. So I'll hand it over to you as you kind of share your story with us and give us some insight into what your life looks like right now as a lecturer and associate director at Texas A&M.
Yeah, thank you, Holly. Thank you, Brian. Well, I'm not originally from Texas, but as we like to say down here, I got here as quickly as I could. I was actually born and raised in Cardiff, which is the capital city of Wales in the United Kingdom. And I came to the United States in 1987. I was on tour with my rugby team from Wales to Colorado, where I met my best friend and my soulmate, my wife, Susie, and we just celebrated 30 years of marriage together. Got two beautiful daughters, Jamie, who lives in Arlington, Texas, and Jordan, who lives in Atlanta. Now, I've been involved in independent school private education for most of my professional life, which is well over 30 years now. I stopped counting at 30 years. About 20 of those have been involved in Christian education. Now, we presently live in College Station, a beautiful day in College Station. I can see out the window. And my wife and I both semi-retired and teach, as you say, at Texas A&M University. And it's interesting, about a month ago, we were just ticking along towards the end of the semester, teaching our classes, doing what needed to be done. And I don't know if you remember, but the first COVID case or the first COVID awareness was a student in College Station,
yes.
Which was interesting. It turned out to be negative. But then within a week, a university of some 70,000 students went into online education. And what I've been amazed with, and also being involved still with Christian schools, is the way in which schools have adjusted, have almost on a dime, have flipped to online learning. And some of the innovations, some of the ideas that have come forth have been extremely, extremely encouraging. And I want to commend everybody for just embracing that and keeping the education of the students at the forefront of what goes on. We're on lockdown for the rest of the year. There's nobody on campus, really, just bare staff. And we're all waiting to see. We're in that wait and see situation now to wait and see what happens next. But I've been involved, like I say, in education all my professional life. And the first time I walked into a classroom as a student teacher, I knew that's what I wanted to do the rest of my life. And during that time, I've taught about every subject, 3rd grade through 12th grade, mainly English, history, social studies. I coach volleyball, track, rugby, whatever else was needed. I've been an athletic director. I've chaired several departments, a middle school principal, head of school. I was even blessed to start a classical Christian school down in Houston once as the founding head, and I think that celebrates 20 years this year. And I came here, I semi-retired in 2018, Woodlands Christian Academy, which is a pre-K through 12 grade school. I was there for 10 years, and during that time, the school grew from 300 to I think just over 700 right now. I was 13 years as the ACSI district representative down here, which representing over 30 Christian schools in the greater Houston area at both the district and national level. And although I'm no longer involved in Christian education directly day to day, since retiring, my heart for Christian education beats as strongly as ever. And my continued passion is to find ways to leverage that experience over the 30 plus years and to multiply all that God has given me over those years. And in the process, try and give it back. And something like this seminar is an excellent way for me to try and do that, to pay it forward, to pay it back.
Well, we're so thankful for all of your years of experience and your willingness to give back. And what's really amazing about your experience is that you have both the local level of being a founding head and a principal at a very quickly growing school, but you also were so involved in your regional part of ACSI, which has a global, ACSI, we had Dr. Lynn Swanner on last week, and just the global footprint that ACSI has. And then now you're serving in higher ed. And so your resume is so helpful to have as a part of this, as we have school leaders who are joining us from all different shapes and sizes and different areas of the country of schools that we're all united in that we are facing unprecedented times right now. And this is unlike anything we've ever seen before. And so, Stephen, we'd love to hear from you. What are some of the pitfalls or traps that you feel like school heads can easily fall into during times like this?
Well, Holly, I think this is unprecedented times, but I think it's very important as we begin this sort of time together, and we look at leadership and leading through a crisis, that there's one truth that we need to identify, and it's this, that if you're in a leadership role in a Christian school at this time, it is no cosmic coincidence that you are there. Sovereign God has appointed you and empowered you and placed you there for such a time as this. And there's an expression that says God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the call. I'm not sure who first coined that phrase, but I think it's true. So right now, I think there's a lot of stress and pressure, fear and anxiety in Christian education. We are human, we're sinners. But right now, leaders may not feel worthy or adequate to fulfill God's call to them, but nevertheless, I think we need to remember that even through this time, God is in it, and he's promised to never forsake us, and he's going to continue to make us complete in every good work which aligns with his will and purpose. So God is there for us. And so I pray that during this time, through the power of the Holy Spirit, everybody will be strengthened and encouraged to continue in what is an unprecedented, challenging time, to live, to love, and also to lead in a way that the entire school community will witness. And they'll witness the joy and the hope that is in us and in all believers. But you're right, this is an unprecedented crisis. I think it was Benjamin Franklin who once said, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. And because of the speed and severity of this virus, I think everything's been turned on its head. And as I was thinking about this, I realized there are some real leadership traps and pitfalls, as you mentioned in the question, that leaders can fall into if we're not very, very careful. There was a great article in the Harvard Business Review recently on leadership, and it was titled, are you leading through the crisis, or are you managing the response? And I think that's a really important question for leaders at Christian schools right now to ask. What are they doing? Are they managing, or are they leading? By managing, what I mean by that is, are you addressing the urgent needs of the present, where you need to make immediate choices, allocate resources, and the pace is fast, pace is furious, and the action is decisive? Or are you leading, which involves guiding people to the best eventual outcome during and more importantly, I think, beyond the crisis? Managing and leading, they're not mutually exclusive, but I think that because a leader has to be a manager at times, and managers sometimes have to lead. But I think during this time, leaders of schools, heads of school, principals, need to have a solid perspective of both. Because I think in crisis, what tends to happen is crises tend to be overmanaged and underled. And I think if you look at this whole crisis as a bell curve, there was the time before the crisis, there's the time we're in the crisis, but there's going to be the time after the crisis as well. And I think leadership needs to be aware of that as well. As what comes next? What does the future look like? And I hope we can touch on that in some of these. But I think some of the pitfalls, as I was thinking about this, I think the first one is we tend to, as leaders at school, when we're faced with a crisis, we take a very narrowed or blinkered view of what to do. I think the human brain somehow is programmed to narrow its focus in the face of a threat. And I think the danger there is that your field of vision becomes restricted to the immediate. Your focus is on the here and now. And then you tend to become reactive rather than proactive in how you lead your school. And if you fail to anticipate the bigger picture, you don't understand what's coming next and start to prepare for that for your school. And I think this is natural. And during my time as a school leader, I was often guilty of this. I think management is seductive. I think we focus during a crisis to a single focus, and I think it's understandable, because if we're brutally honest, when we're managing during something like a crisis, it can feel really thrilling. Your adrenaline kicks in because it spikes as you make decisions and the actions that you take, and I think you feel a feeling of adding tangible value. But I think that feeling is like a sugar high, which has a crash that comes right after it. And I think if you just adopt a management role in your operational comfort zone, I think you're missing the bigger picture. I think you need to lead through a crisis, which is take a longer view as opposed to somebody solely managing it at present. We have no idea what the future is going to look like. We really don't. But I'm certain of one thing, that things will not be the same when we emerge from this. There's going to be a new normal. And I think this means for school leaders, what's implicit upon school leaders here, is they need to try now and to anticipate and be planning for what comes next, what next month, next year, in order to prepare their schools for the changes ahead. And I think a third pitfall, a third trap that perhaps leaders can fall into is, and it sort of dovetails in with managing, is we tend to go to our default, which is managing. And in doing so, we sort of over-centralize the response. It becomes about us. It's all about us and the decision-making process. Because the temptation is to put yourself during a crisis as the leader into the center of activity. And this type of top-down leadership, I don't think engenders the kind of stability that you want. But it's understandable that as the leader, you want to ensure all is well. But just as Paul in the New Testament had his Timothy, his trusted assistant, I think that it's important that you find your Timothys. You have to acknowledge that you cannot control anything. And then determine what kind of decisions only you can make, and delegate the rest to your leadership team. And I hope now, and I think most schools have, they have created a structure or network of trusted individuals, and they've delegated very clear responsibilities. And I think that one of the major goals during this time for leadership in Christian schools is to seek order rather than control. And by that, I mean structure where your leadership team know what's expected of them and what they can expect of others. But to for this to be effective, I think you need absolute clarity on intent and priority. Everybody on your team, in other words, needs to clearly understand and be able to articulate, which is more important, what the school intends to do, why the school intends to do it, and the order in which the school is going to do it. I think that needs to be the filter through which you run all the information that goes out from your school. What do you intend to do? Why do you intend to do it? What order are you going to do it in? Because a leader, I don't think, can empower a team if there's any uncertainty in direction or priority. So I think those are the three major pitfalls I think that you need to be aware of as a leader. They need to be avoided. But I would also add this little caveat at the end here, which I think is really, really important. Your leadership team, whoever that is, really needs to be honest and transparent. I heard the expression once about the culture of truth tellers. You need a culture of truth tellers. And Jamie Dimon, reading an article recently, who was the CEO of JP Morgan, says that this culture of truth tellers is so important because everybody on your leadership team needs to be sharing the truth candidly, no matter how painful. It's vital in success, for success during a crisis like this, because how else can you solve problems if we don't even acknowledge their existence? So I think this idea of brutal truthfulness, if you like, truth tellers within your leadership team is also very, very important.
Absolutely, Stephen. We have a client that calls that the last 10%. He always asks in his leadership team meetings, is that your last 10%? Meaning you got to give it all to me up front. And I think that takes a very humble leader, but a very good leader to be able to receive and desire to hear all of that truth. You said so much wisdom there, Stephen, in that one answer. I feel like we could unpack so much of that. But one thing that really stood out to me that you just said was having to be very clear about where your school is headed. We have heard that over and over again from each of our speakers on these school webinars, is that this is the time for Christian education to shine, in the sense that you can differentiate yourself from what the public school is doing by getting ahead, being excellent, infusing the biblical principles into everything you're doing. And parents are able to really see on a minute by minute basis the education that their children are getting from the amazing teachers and staff. So Brian, anything you would add to those pitfalls that Stephen mentioned?
One thing I would echo is I love Stephen's his distinction between leading and managing during these times. And I think you're right, Stephen, that they can't be mutually exclusive. And as a leader of a school, you're going to have to oscillate back and forth. And it could be multiple times in a day you're oscillating back and forth. And so be aware, your pitfall could be aware of where you're going to default to, and make sure those trusted advisors around you, your Timothys around you, can be honest with you and say, hey, right now I see you going down this path, and right now we really need a management of the crisis in this moment. And then also have the courage to say, hey, right now we have some space and time, and we need to be thinking about how we're going to lead forward in the coming months, in the coming year. And so I love the idea of leading and managing together, and just be aware of where you're going to be doing that, because both right now are needed during this time and into the coming months. I would also say a pitfall that I could see during this time is losing sight of the vision of what our school is meant to do, losing sight of our mission and vision. And don't be afraid. I guess the pitfall would be not adjusting your vision moving into the future. Don't be afraid to take a hard look at your vision and say, where do we need to make, what's non-negotiable? What are the levers we're not going to pull on our vision, because we need to, this is who we are and we need to keep moving forward. But where do we need to have some real conversations about what is the vision we're going to be focused on moving into this new reality? Stephen's right, it's going to be different. And so where do we need to adjust our vision so that we can fully live into and flourish as a school moving into this new reality?
Yeah.
And I would just echo what Brian said there, that the mission and vision are your reason for being. It's why God called you into existence, your mission. Those always need to be the filter through which you run all your decisions. in the present, in the crisis, and going forward as well. That is so important. That's your anchor as a school. And as you start to make decisions, the question has to be asked, do these support our mission and vision, or do these detract from our mission and vision? Because there's going to be temptation to look around you and see what other schools, other organizations are doing. And I would really encourage you to be true to your mission and vision. And as you communicate with your wider school community, make sure that those are the filters you're running through, so that your school is constantly made aware of why you were called into existence, what your purpose is, where you're going as a school. Those God-given missions and visions are so important during this time, and they're the anchor for that school to hold on to. And it's so easy to get pulled in so many different directions with all this misinformation that's out there. My goodness, you can turn on any TV channel or pick up any social media page and you'll get conflicting ideas of what's going on right now. So stay true to your mission and vision. I would really say that as you make decisions. And I think that will give you a center and a unity as a school in your decision-making process.
Absolutely. So moving on to our next question, Stephen, and actually before I ask you this, I would love to hear from the questions from those that are attending today. So in your GoToWebinar panel, there is a question box where you can type your questions to me, and then I'll filter through those, and we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So would love to hear from you. You've got an amazing 40 minutes left with Stephen today to soak up his wisdom. So please do send me your questions in the question box. So Stephen, crises are crises because of people. That's how we end up in these situations. And so there's a lot of fear and anxiety right now, which of course makes sense. We're all feeling that. I mean, even if you feel like, today I'm not feeling as anxious as I was yesterday, there's still this underlying anxiety that we all are feeling right now, the uncertainty. So what should school leaders do right now to help alleviate this fear and stress and anxiety? And just before you answer, I do want to also have you speak into the fact that a lot of school leaders are hearing fear from many different voices right now. Maybe it's their staff, maybe it's their teachers, maybe it's their parents. It could even be their board. So how can school leaders really manage and help alleviate that as they're leading all of these different constituents right now?
That's a great point, Holly. It may seem obvious, but crises are crises because they affect people. And although we're told, fear not, be anxious for nothing, we're humans. We are sinners, and we do tend in situations like this to become fearful and anxious. You can't forget this, I don't think, as you lead your school, that it's about people, and it needs to be front and center of your thinking and your planning, because I think as a leader, you can become trapped by focusing on the sometimes overwhelming day-to-day needs, the management issues, enrollments, budgets, faculty contracts, lost tuition. Now, I don't want to minimize these at all. These are important. But I think it's important to remember that the outcomes of these are the coordinated efforts of people. People matter. And please don't ignore or underestimate the level of anxiety and fear that people are beginning to feel right now. And as the crisis continues to move ahead, that will only grow. So I think you and your leadership team, it's important that you bring some structure and stability into the lives of your school community right now. And during a crisis, there are many things you don't know, but you can still bring much needed stability and much needed structure with clear and accurate and consistent communication. So clear, accurate, consistent communication, I think, is something that needs to be at the forefront of our thinking. Here are some practical suggestions that I've heard from schools, what schools are doing during this time to try and bring about that sense of stability and structure. You might want to consider these if you're not already doing them. And if there are others, please feel free to share the question and answer at the end. I think we're all in this together, and there's collective wisdom, which is very, very powerful. I mean, I think the first thing to establish this structure and sense of order that's sadly missing and causing this fear and anxiety is to make sure that you've established new regular check-in routines staying in touch with your team is so important. It's more important now than ever. So I think setting a new routine of 15 to 30-minute check-ins, maybe every other day, maybe now more important than ever. I think that's very important. It also reinforces to your team that we're not alone in responding, to the challenges that we face. Your team could then do likewise with their designated group at a fixed time through Zoom or GoToMeeting or whatever other platform that they desire to use. I've heard of schools who are, again, to create the stability and structure and sense of normality, Zoom a town hall style meeting with your parents once a week to give them updates, to allow them to ask questions. Teachers could do similar with their classes. You get the idea. Structure and establishing a sense of order and normality is really the key. Because this unprecedented isolation is really a challenge in itself. And it's important for school leaders to create safe spaces as well. I think this is something that struck me. This is because I was thinking about this, both fear and anxiety. Don't ignore the need to create safe spaces for employers to be able to honestly and openly share and express their concerns. Set aside a time intentionally for these emotional check-ins, during the meetings, and emphasize. I think it's important if you do this and set up these emotional check-ins. Be honest and upfront to say, as long as the conversations are healthy, honest, and fair, then there will not be any repercussions for somebody speaking up. I think that's really important. This can take time, but it's not wasted minutes. I think ignoring employee voices is an excellent way to start a crisis, a ball rolling in a crisis in the future. And don't underestimate, as I said earlier, I think it's very, very important, the extent of fear and anxiety that people are really feeling right now, which is only getting magnified. There is a lot, as I said earlier, of misinformation, half-truths, making the rounds in the media and on social media. But by intentionally seeking to bring the structure and order into the lives of your school community by intentional communication, I think you go a long way towards taking things back under control. And this is going to help, I think, with the mental health, the stability of the faculty, the staff, the parents, and students, which you shouldn't underestimate in these times of crisis, because people have real questions around their children, around their families, around their jobs, many other topics. So any structure and stability that you can provide by how you communicate and what you communicate is really, really important during this time. I can't emphasize that enough.
That was great, Stephen. You got really practical there, which was super helpful. So establishing regular check-ins with your staff and team, having town halls once a week with parents, and even encouraging teachers to consider what that might look like in their own classrooms. And then creating safe places by providing structure and stability so that you give people the opportunity to safely bring up their fear and anxiety and talk about that freely without the added fear of repercussion that might happen from their leaders.
Yeah.
That's tremendous. Brian, I'm curious, you've been on the phone with a lot of school leaders over the last few weeks. What are you seeing regarding any practical tips or inspiration that you have for those listening today as far as alleviating the fear and anxiety that school leaders or parents are feeling right now?
Yeah, the fear is very real, and I agree with Stephen. There's there's a sense where we need to be, certainty is a great commodity right now in a time of uncertainty. And we have a lot of uncertainty. We just don't know a lot of things about what the future holds, about when certain measures will change. But we need to hold on to what we do know. And we do get to point to a lot of promises in the scriptures that we hold on to as truth. And so it's taking the encouragement from those. I was just on the phone 2 days ago with a school head, and he was being very honest with me about, I don't know. I really don't think we'll be back in session this year, and I don't know what the fall holds. I really don't. And so those fears are very real, and I think we just need to be honest with those. I think we can quickly slip into either being cynics right now and just the world ending, or we can slip into a naive optimism, which isn't healthy either. And so
I'm encouraging people, be hopeful realists, right? Be very aware of the things that are in play and what we need to be considering. We could go to, our practical, the things Stephen just shared are great. We can talk about contingency plans and all sorts of things we need to be doing for the coming months, and be real about those. Be honest with our folks, because just doing the fluff in the sky right now, everything is going to be fine, shoo, is not going to be helpful to people and alleviating fears. And so being honest with them, but also being hopeful. We know the Lord will get us through this. Things will be very different, but we trust in him because we know that he has intentions for us, and we're going to follow his will through this. So it's that balance of being hopeful and realistic at the same time that I think is helpful.
Can I just add, Holly, as well? I think that one of the strengths of Christian schools is the sense of Christian community that they engender. And in a very short space of time, that was taken away. It's gone. I think you have an opportunity using resources such as this to start to recreate a sense of that school community again. We're built to be in community as believers. Create that sense of school community any way you can. Be looking for ways to do that and build that order and structure, or help to build that back into people's lives, because that's what's missing now. The uncertainty about the future. When is this going to end? Is this going to end? That creates instability, which leads to that anxiety and stress. And I think we have a great opportunity to really put the idea of Christian community back to the forefront, the community of believers, and to reach out to our parents and our faculty and our students in the school community, and intentionally rebuild that.
Absolutely. Community is the bedrock, and that's so important, especially in a time right now. So that's great advice. Let's dive into the question that we have gotten so much of, and I'm so glad that you're going to speak on this today, Stephen. But let's dive into communication, because it's hard. We know we need to communicate, but how and what and how often? And then you've got people like Brian and his family who have 4 kids in 3 different schools, and they're getting communication from all different, places. So what is your advice on what should be communicated to the school community and how to best communicate it during a time like this?
Yeah, I began to touch on the importance of communication earlier, Holly, but somebody once said that communication works for those who work at it. So I think how, and as importantly, what you communicate to your school community during this time will largely determine, I think, how you come out of this, okay? Because there is going to be a post this. Life is going to go on in some shape or form. And I think you have a lot more say in what that's going to look like as the leader of your school, or what your leadership team does. And we probably give ourselves credit for. Communication, I once read, can be quantified a little like this: 55% visual, 38% tone, and 7% what you say. I think that's why it's important that we take advantage during this time of Zoom or similar, like GoToMeeting that we're on today. It's a very powerful means of communication. I think it's really important that you have a desire as a leader to give your community a sense of relief and confidence. But you've got to be careful that you don't give them false relief and false confidence. So don't overpromise. And that's hard because schools are known for their compassion, the compassionate leadership team. But you have to push yourself out. Don't overpromise. Would be something I would say is a watch thought as you think about communication. And be very conscious in the midst of this upheaval, in the midst of this crisis, that you try and maintain a balance. Don't be too negative and don't be too optimistic. And I think as you begin to think about how you communicate and what you communicate, the old adage of honesty is the best policy is really good to bear in mind. And I think you need to ask yourself this: is my statement absolutely true? And if I'm required to do something to make it true, can I do it? As you begin to look towards the future. I love the expression, I heard it once, it's called deliberate calm. And I think that's what we need from our leaders right now within schools and within Christian organizations is a sense of deliberate calm. So let's talk a little bit about what should the messaging be or the narrative be during this time with all this misinformation and half-truths. It's important to realize, and I think we all know this instinctively, that there is never a vacuum in communication. If we say nothing, we're saying nothing. That vacuum is getting filled all the time. It's important to remember that. Now, I've participated in several town halls with ACSI who are doing an incredible job with Christian schools worldwide. We've heard from schools in Australia, China, as well as here in the United States. The one from China was very, very interesting, actually.
I bet.
And here are some of the things. Here are some of the things that I think you can think about as you begin to intentionally decide what your messaging is going to be. I think you need to shift the conversation from a mentality of school closure to we are going to finish the year strongly. And I think you can control this narrative, this message. We owe it. We owe it to our family, we owe it to our staff, and we owe it to the mission which we are called to do to fulfill our obligations. So I think you need to shift the mindset there. I think the mindset also shifts to whether we should do something to how do we get there. We need to continue with our programs. Probably don't cancel assessments or forego testing, or don't forego or compromise the higher educational standards that you've set for yourself. So don't talk about whether we should do this, talk about how we're going to get there to fulfill our mission. Parents are beginning to wonder about tuition. I know you still have your contracts with parents to provide an excellent education. I think you need to assure them that their children will continue to receive the best possible education, which is what you've contracted with them to do. They are not homeschooling their children. Make sure you make that. They are partnering with you during this crisis. I think you can use that as a talking point to rally around. On a lighter note, I think never miss an opportunity to share the words of that great philosopher Winnie the Pooh that I think are more relevant now than ever. You know, promise me you'll always remember that you're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. There's also an opportunity here, I think, talking about there's communication and community, to celebrate all victories, large and small. When you're doing adaptive actions in the way you teach, celebrate those victories, get that information out there. Never miss a chance to communicate what God is doing, because I think we're told in Scripture that the Holy Spirit dwells in the presence of his people. I would say highlight the rays of light. Good things going on, good things are happening in schools. They should be as much a part, these little rays of light, that narrative, as the losses we experience. Some practical ideas that I've heard schools using to do this as they communicate. Maybe a parent appreciation video highlighting the positive things that are happening during this crisis. Get parents to maybe make a video that can be sent out through the different channels that you use on your website, on your social media, to your parents. Maybe parent interviews about the positive things that are happening during this time, how God is working, how the partnership between home and school is working. Collect parent quotes and also positive quotes from parents as well. Distribute those during this time. I've heard of schools doing a weekly devotional to the school community, either by the head of school, the principal, or chosen members. I think that's a powerful way. And I've also heard of schools, by the way, doing virtual shadowing. I know this is enrollment period at schools, where they've had students actually on campus, social distancing, of course, but doing virtual shadowing, taking them around the school, answering questions from potential students. So I think we're looking at innovative and creative ways to continue to communicate with that. And I think those are some practical steps that I've heard, and why I'm so encouraged, because schools, Christian schools, are stepping up to the challenge and doing some incredible things, and never let us lose sight. God is in this, and great things are happening through this. God is still at work, and great things are happening in our schools. And let's highlight those great things. Let's highlight the positives and not miss an opportunity to do it.
So many good ideas there, Stephen. I've loved what you said at the very beginning, that we need to change the messaging from closure to we're going to finish this year as strong as possible, and here's how we're going to do that. And then your ideas were so great there about the parent appreciation videos and weekly devotionals of just using the technology that we have, which is just amazing these days. What a phenomenal this is a terrible time for this to happen, but what an amazing time for this to happen, where we have the technology, where we can feel connected without being in person. And so those were tremendous ideas. Brian, what would you add to that? Any ideas that you're seeing as we think about communication and creativity to stay connected with communities?
I'm seeing a lot of the same things Stephen's doing, and I think those are all great. The only thing I would add to the mix here is just, Stephen was mentioning, be innovative, and I actually fully support that. Be creative, do things in your communication flow that you've never done before. I should probably, I don't want you to just do things to do new fun things to see if they try. This isn't the time to do that. But if you've been thinking about new modes of communication, put those into play right now, because communication, it is one of the highest commodities right now, and families need to be hearing from you. And I would use multiple channels. Don't just rely on email. Don't just rely on Facebook messengers if that's what you're using. Make sure that you're using multiple channels so that people are seeing that you're paying attention to your communication in multiple ways. And I would say, if you've got a communication team at your school, if your school is one that has one, use them more than you ever have before. If you don't have one, put one together. Take some of your, I've talked to a lot of schools who have staff members, they're just not quite sure what duties to give them because they're more of an on-campus type person. Pull those people together and give them communication responsibilities right now. Let them own that, so that you have somebody or some group of people paying attention to intentional communication right now, because it is so valuable.
Absolutely. Lots of creative restructuring at schools right now. And one of the best things, and we're seeing this over and over again from different clients or schools that are just a part of our Vanderbloemen community, is saying, yes, this person had an on-campus job, but now they have a list of parents that they're calling through on a daily basis just to make that connection and find out how the school can support them. So a lot of creativity happening there, which is so helpful. Well, let's dive into some Q&A. So if you've got a question for Stephen, would love for you to put that there in your GoToWebinar question box, and we will do our best to answer those today. So Stephen, one question, earlier, one of the first things that you talked about was the importance of those Timothys, the importance of those advisors that you have around you as a school leader. Should your leadership team look the same or different in a time like this? Do you recommend that the leadership team stay the way it was, or that you pull in different people who might not have been on the leadership team before to help lead through this? So talk us through what that leadership team should really look like practically.
I think schools going into this crisis would already have had a leadership team in place. And I think what this will do, this crisis, it will stress test that leadership team, see how effective that leadership team is. So I think as a leader of your school, you need to be aware of perhaps the need to make necessary changes to supplement, augment, the team. Do crises create leaders, or the leaders? How does that work? I think you're going to have faculty, I think you're going to have staff who will step up in this crisis, and those people shouldn't be ignored for the role that they can play as well. God is at work, and I think he's going to raise up leaders for you within your team. I think it will really test your team, the ability to be totally transparent and honest. I think it will test your the way in which you've assigned responsibilities, how effective that structure is. I think it will do a lot of things for your leadership team. What I would say as well, I think it's important. This virus blindsided us as far as schools are concerned, and threw the leadership team on its head at your school. I think we need to do a better job of crisis preparedness as leaders and leadership teams in your school. And I think that we need to really be thinking as we go forward into deliberately and intentionally planning sessions where we can learn how we will react, how we will respond to any crises that affect the school. If you don't already do that, I think you build that into a professional development plan where you and your leadership team practice and learn what the response should be and who is responsible for what. Because I think it's, to believe what's being said is true, when a crisis comes again, we are much better prepared than we have been for this one. So I think it will really stress test leadership teams, and I think that leaders, school heads, principals need to be open to any changes they need to make to be able to steer the ship through the storm. And I say through the storm intentionally because we will come out the other side of the storm.
And that's such a good point, Stephen. We, at Vanderbloemen, one of the things that we help Christian schools with is succession planning. But nobody wants to talk about succession. It's like that annual checkup where you're like, yeah, I know I need to do this, but it's not until you have the heart attack where you're like, oh yeah, I really should have gone to that annual checkup. And what you're saying is so.
Or that bus gets you, the one that always hits you, they're hit by that bus.
Exactly.
Something like that happens. What do you do? What do you do as a school? And I think it's something we don't want to look at because it means somebody's leaving. There's a change coming. But I think it's important that you do have that succession plan in place. I know Vanderbloemen is very, very instrumental in emphasizing that and helping schools and other organizations think through that. What does succession look like? Because you really want to try and maintain what you've built as a school, the culture of the school. And I think good succession planning will help you do that. Something that needs to be thought about as well. Good point.
Absolutely. Here's a question from Jonathan. How soon should we discuss next school year with the admin team? Some say stay focused on the present. Others say make contingency plans now. Of course, heads of schools should be considering contingency, but how helpful would it be to share this with the admin team?
Yeah, I think thinking back to my days in school leadership, this is you're right in the middle of, or should be right now, in enrollment period at the school, looking at projections for enrollment and doing budgets and hiring and so on and so forth. Based off that, I think you need to somehow try and get an idea of what enrollment could look like for next year, first of all, before you start to make any kind of decisions. Maybe consider maybe an anonymous survey to your parents to more accurately gauge what it might look like. I would say call your families as well. Ask how they're doing. Try and ascertain their current situation and their future plans, so that you can start to make those projections. When you're there, then I think you have some decisions to make when you have an idea. I would really, really encourage schools the word I use is stress test. My wife, who's from the business sector, says I'm using the term incorrectly, but this is what it is. I think you should sit down with your admin team, and as painful as this is, if you thought succession planning was painful, try this one. See what your school would look like with a 20% reduction in enrollment and a 50% reduction in enrollment. What programs are essential? What could you perhaps cut or move online? Prioritize those. Could some grades be combined, for example? How would that look? Which faculty could you let go? Which staff could you let go in those scenarios? What would you do to maintain the integrity of the school mission if your enrollment dropped to 20 to 50%? I think you sit with your leadership team, maybe your board, and you begin to run through that. Not that that's going to happen, but I think you have to have contingencies in place. You have to try and get some idea and start planning for what the future may look like. So those are things that I think need to be discussed before you start to make decisions on what you're going to do, as you go forward. I hope that helped. Can I say something as well, Holly, on that idea of communication? Because I think this crisis has given us some great opportunities as Christian schools. We're able to do some things that other schools can't do right now. And I think one of the big concerns as we look forward to what next year might look like is the fear that parents are going to have that my child is going to get sick. Okay? And I think it will be a great time. I personally am getting in my emails from airlines and other organizations that I shop with, reassuring me and telling me what they are going to do to keep me safe, okay, in the future. So I will continue to fly and continue to use their products and so on and so forth. I think we have a great opportunity here as Christian schools to put together, for want of a better term, you call it what you like, a safety preparedness plan of what we are going to do to get this out to parents now as we go through this period of enrollment, okay? Let's care about the health of their children, about COVID-19. What added value? What can you offer as a school? Perhaps other schools can't. with this uncertainty and fear. For example, you could say something like, I was thinking about this yesterday. We will remotely test the temperature of all students entering school. We will do that. And if there's a temperature above a certain, they will not be admitted to school. We will institute mandatory hand washing every hour. Hand sanitizer will be available in each of our classrooms. We will put the desks further apart. We're going to practice deep cleaning of our classrooms and public areas every day. Be specific. I was reading the other day about a process a little like fogging a room. I mean, we can offer that. We can be proactive and say, this is our safety plan. So we scream the message loud and clear and often. We are going to keep your children safe, and this is how. Because I think then you're taking away some of the fear, helping to alleviate some fear parents might have. But I think we have a chance to be proactive in this and put these plans in place right now and get this information out. I think it will help with enrollment, help with those numbers that you need to get a handle on in order to start projecting what next year might look like.
Absolutely. And that goes back to what you said earlier under the communication part about moving from the school closure messaging to the strong ending and being forward focused of this is what we're going to do to keep your child safe. And it will also help you get ahead of the public school system that just because of resources will likely be behind on that front. And that's a huge advantage that private Christian schools have to be able to communicate that loud and clear up front. So Brian, I know it looks like you had something to add, so I'd love to hear from you as well.
Oh, I have a couple of thoughts because I love the stuff Stephen's sharing. One back to the previous point, then I want to come to the preparing and how we can take advantage of the situation. But we've talked on a few of these webinars, contingency plans, and all of you are thinking about contingency plans, or hopefully you are. One thing I would add, just practically, be thinking of, put some dates on your contingency plan decision-making process tree, if that's what you want to call it. So what decisions are we going to make? We have to make this decision or these decisions on May 1 or on May 20. What decisions do we need to make on June 1, June 15th? Just so you have it in your mind that we know we need our drop dead dates on some of these decisions need to be put down, and so that we are looking at what we need to have in place to make those decisions. I think that can be really helpful. One of the things Stephen's just talking about, how do we share the message of what we're going to do for our families and our kids when we do return to school? And I think that's fantastic, and I think you should be doing that. Just yesterday, one of my alma maters sent out, I received an email, they're putting together a relief fund, right? So there are things that can't be met by the constraints of their current budget for things that have come up because of COVID, right? So there's technology needs that are coming up because everything's gone remote. And then they're planning for a return to campus safety precautions, and that's going to cost money. So one idea could be, how do you want to set up a relief fund? Because then your messaging is also going out to your key donors and other constituents, seeing, hey, we are taking proactive measures to prepare for a new reality in ways that care for our students. And we want you to know that you can help us do that, and just purely the message of getting it out there so that your other constituents are saying, oh, wow, they are ahead of the curve on this. And I think I'm going to continue to share the message about this school because they are doing it in a way that is just awesome right now.
That's great. Stephen, we've got a question from Megan here. Opinion of virtual graduation versus on-campus graduation later in the year, or both? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really feel for the seniors. I was looking at my social media this morning, and I could see the seniors at Woodlands Christian who are not experiencing all that goes with it, with that senior year. So my heart really, really goes out to them. I would think that a lot of schools out there are looking for ways to recognize their senior classes as they graduate. One of the things I know Woodlands Christian has done is they've hung senior memorabilia on the doors of the houses of seniors. And I've heard schools doing things like that to celebrate seniors and using social media. I would look at the opportunity of doing both, actually. I mean, I really would. We're not sure whether the live one can ever take place. So if you're just relying on doing it live, that may never happen until I believe it will someday, but maybe not in the summer. I think that might be an unrealistic timeline. So I would look at virtual graduations, ways in which you could do that. I think that should be encouraged. I'm sure there are a lot of schools out there that could share ideas. But I would also hold out the hope, because I think we do have to have hope here as believers and as Christian schools. We have to have the hope that's in us and share that hope that this is going to get better. To have it for them as well sometime over the summer, and make contingency plans for that to happen. Should these, I know in Brazos County right now, and in Texas, Governor Abbott's looking to lift some of these restrictions. We don't know what that's going to look like. We really don't, or what might happen as a result of that. But I would really, it's so encouraging to hear that the hearts of the leaders is still with the seniors and what we can do for them. So I would encourage you to look at both. I really would. I really would.
That's great. We've got 2 questions before in 3 minutes. So one question is, and I know this is a really, really hard question. It's going to look different for every Christian school, but to your point on contingency plans, when should a school look at potentially merging with another school in the area or closing their doors? Because that's a reality that some schools are going to need to think through. So when should that conversation be approached as they're thinking through their contingency plans?
This is why I can't emphasize strongly enough that you need to try and get some kind of idea of what enrollment might look like. If parents are out of work and can't afford, you can be creative with tuition plans. You can do that. You can reach out to them and say, we can be creative. You can set up a scholarship fund, knowing that that's going to be a need as well. And those parents who can give, will give. I think I would abandon capital projects and things like that for the foreseeable future for next school year, to pool your resources into a scholarship fund, to keep as many students as you can. But I think when you get an idea of what enrollment may look like, as changing as that could be, then you can make some decisions. And the decisions then say, can we, going back to mission and vision, the importance of those, can we maintain the quality education? Can we fulfill what we've made a commitment to our parents to do as a school, as our mission and vision exemplifies? Can we do that? And if you feel you cannot do that as a school, then I would look to other possibilities, such as merging with other schools, if that's even a possibility. But I think until you get a handle on enrollment to some extent, what it might look like, all these other decisions kind of flow from there. So I would be really proactive and intentional now in getting on the phone and starting to talk and trying to really understand the needs of our parents and what enrollment might look like. But I certainly wouldn't say no to the possibility of merging resources. I think we need Christian schools more than ever, and I would rather see 2 merge than 2 close. That's
fantastic. And last question, and then Brian, I would love for you to pray over Stephen and all of the attendees on our webinar today. So Stephen, as this territory is new for everyone, how do you practically balance grace and strength, not only with your team, but also yourself? This is from Jamie.
I think it's important during this time, like I said earlier, to find your anchor. And our strength is in the Lord. And faith is tested in the crucible of affliction, isn't it? Which is we're in right now. And we're going to come forth shining like gold. That will happen. God is at work. I think you need to I think you need to constantly recognize that. But I think that to find that balance, I would say this, that the current situation provides us with an opportunity to show the world how well as Christian schools we can accomplish our mission during these challenging times. The scripture in Matthew 5:16 says, "Let your light shine before men so they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." And I think now is the time to shine. We may be in quarantine right now, but we never be accused of putting our faith in quarantine. I would say to leaders out there, practice self-care, take care of yourself. Lean into the Lord during this time as you've never done before. Surround yourself with a leadership team that clearly understands what you're going to do, why you're going to do it, and how you're going to do it, and can clearly articulate the mission and vision of your school in every action you take. Lean on others, bring that team around you. And I think God will sustain, and God will bring you through this. I think that this webinar is called Leading Schools in a Crisis. I think it should be called leading schools in and through the crisis, because we will come through this crisis. Remember Psalm 23, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. I walk through it, and we're walking through it. So God bless you all out there for doing what you do in Christian schools. My heart's still with you, although I'm at Texas A&M finance department. My heart will always be there for Christian schools. So God bless you. Stay strong, and this too shall pass. This too shall pass.
Well, thank you so much for your wisdom, Stephen. Brian, will you pray us out, and then we'll shut down the webinar so we can all go back to serving our Christian schools.
Absolutely. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, this new day where we know that your grace and mercy is still new every morning. We have so many promises in the scriptures. We've talked about many of them that we can hold to in the midst of uncertainty and some fear, anxiety. We know that you sit on the throne, and we know that you will see us through this. We thank you for the wisdom of Stephen and his heart and passion for Christian education and serving it well for the many years that he's done that. We thank you for the work he's doing now. Bless him and his marriage and his family during these days as well. We pray for our school leaders and our schools families and our students as we try and lead them through this crisis with the wisdom you've given us. May you continue to bless each and every school with the resources they need, with the strength in their leadership and the courage to keep taking steps forward in the days to come. Above all else, God, we pray that we would glorify you in what we do and say and how we lead with your strength. Grant us a special courage in our leadership during these days. We pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Brian
Amen.
and Stephen. Bye-bye.
My pleasure. Stay safe. Bye-bye.